Business Secretary Johnny Reynolds was so fed up with people criticising him for never having run a business that he went and bought himself a whopping great steel mill in Scunthorpe. Now firmly a member of the boss class, will he have sympathy with the business chiefs who this week begged the government to rip up their looming employment rights bill? Welcome back to the Week in Business with me, Christian May. Ministers insist that their reforms to employment law will be good for business, good for workers and good for the economy. Actual employers, on the other hand, warn that the measures, largely written by trade unions, will be deeply damaging to economic growth and will worsen living standards in the UK. Will worsen living standards. We've been critical of large parts of the Employment Rights Bill ever since it first reared its head, and we certainly haven't been alone in that. Employment lawyers, small business owners, large employers, basically anyone who knows what they're talking about, have warned that however well-intentioned Labour's reforms are, the consequences will not be a workers' paradise, but a private sector entangled in mountains of red tape, facing legal challenges at every turn and deterred from creating jobs. Now, last night, City AM got hold of a highly unusual letter that has today been sent to every member of the House of Lords. Signed by the CBI, the Institute of Directors, the Federation of Small Business, the British Chambers of Commerce and Make UK, the Manufacturers Association, the letter is in effect signed by tens of thousands of employers across the full spectrum of business sizes, locations and sectors. In other words, it carries some serious weight. And this isn't just special pleading for an easier ride. The letter is surgical in its critique of the proposed changes to employment law and very constructive when it comes to how changes should be made that support the aims of the bill without the devastating consequences many businesses now fear. As the authors note, for us the challenge has never been what the government wants to achieve, but the unintended consequences of how they implement it. As the bill works its way through the House of Lords, businesses are urging Parliament to make specific changes. For example, they warned that the policy of protecting employees from unfair dismissal from day one of a new job will make businesses more cautious about creating new jobs when taking the risk of trying to grow, because dismissals from day one will count as redundancies and could therefore trigger collective consultation requirements. Furthermore, the proposal to enshrine in law a legal right for workers to be offered a guaranteed hours contract instead of a flexible or a 0 hours contract will cause havoc among employers whose demand for staff is seasonal or unpredictable, and it will penalise the very people for whom flexible or periodic work is essential. As the letter says, this change provides no clear benefit to workers. And the business groups suggest the reasonable alternative that people should have the right to request a contract of guaranteed hours. The letter goes on to set out very specific concerns about changes to the power of trade unions, changes to statutory sick pay, and changes to the rules around dismissal of employees and changes to contracts or terms of employment. The authors conclude that unless the Employment Rights Bill is amended to take into account the perspectives of employers, then it will have a deeply damaging impact on the government's growth missions and will simply stifle innovation and productivity. In short, Labour MPs and highly paid trade union officials can sit back and think it's a job well done, that they've put a stopper over the capers of those dastardly capitalists. The people who will suffer from this bill are those who do not get a job, who do not get a foot on the employment ladder, who do not move from welfare into work because the new laws make it harder, more complicated and more risky to take on new staff. And so, while Jonathan Reynolds currently poses as the saviour of British steel and the thousands of jobs supported by that industry, the government's commitment to pushing through their employment rights bill demonstrates that ministers still haven't got a clue about the realities of the private sector and the combination of risk, investment, time, money and uncertainty that goes into the creation of every single private sector job. And of course, the real madness here is that having increased taxes on employment, having increased the cost of employment, and now having insisted on these confidence-crushing and job-destroying reforms to employment law, ministers say they're on a mission to get people back into work, off welfare and into jobs. Which jobs? In bars, shops and restaurants? Forget it, they can't afford it now. On a flexible basis to gain skills and confidence? Not under these reforms. Even the most public-spirited and benevolent employer will think twice about giving someone a chance because the government has made it illogical and very high risk to do so. At this time of maximum economic uncertainty, the government's number one mission should be on supporting businesses and supporting job creation. What could matter more? Instead, they've made life for employers harder, riskier, more expensive and more complicated. slow clap. Well, that's it from me this week. Stay up to date and in the know with the City AM app and on cityam.com, and I will see you here next week.